Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Be Your Own Hero podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Renew, author and entrepreneur. And today I'm excited to have fellow creatives, authors, artists with me here today. So I'm going to be introducing this amazing team, author and artist team, for a brand new graphic novel that was just released last month in November through Dark Horse Books. So Author Tem Blessed is with me here today, and he is the mind behind the fantasy novel Planeta Blu, Rise of Agoo. And he teamed up with fellow friend and artist Michael LaRiccia to turn this awesome novel into this really cool graphic novel. So Tim, Mike, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Excited to be here.
Well, and to start, I got to hold it up. So this is Rise of Agoo. Just absolutely stunning. If everyone can see it here. Absolutely stunning. I mean, and as you just flip through, you can just see like, wow, just the art is so beautiful. So congrats, you guys. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you. Special shout out to Mike, the amazing illustrator and artist. For
you guys are too much. It'll make me cry before we even do this.
Oh. Well, art is such a vulnerable thing, right? You're bringing your passion, your creativity to the world. So, but yeah, so I love the overall theme with the book, and there's a little bit about this on the back cover, just with, being a story about courage and compassion and the sacrifice to make the world a better place for all all living creatures on the earth. So, Tim, this is this came from your mind originally. I'd love for you to share kind of the backstory behind, what inspired you to write it. And I think a little birdie told me that it had something to do with some bedtime stories that you're reading to your kids. So
yeah, no, totally. Yeah, thank you so much for the question. Yeah, that's where it originated. I have children, and they wanted to not only have me read to them, but also come up with these stories off the top of my mind. So I used to freestyle these stories all the time about talking animals. And, as they got older, some of the stories got a little bit more intense just because they were starting to be, preteens or whatever the case is, or they knew about what was happening in the world around sustainability. And so I started telling, this story that didn't just live in the nighttime. I started thinking about it during the day. I started kind of picking their minds because I saw that they were really excited about that. As an artist yourself, you know that, sometimes you tell a story and people are like, that's okay. And then sometimes you tell a story where people are like, oh, wow. And they have questions and they want to know more about it. And they keep asking about it. And so my children were very much intrigued by this idea of Planeta Blu, which obviously I didn't have a name for it. It was just about these kids who went underwater and, they got put on trial for all the atrocities that humanity had done towards animal kind and towards each other. And so I started picking their brains too about like, hey, I want there to be a council. I want, who do you all think should be on this council? And I also started, jotting down or drawing, because I'm an artist, not as good as Michael, but enough where I was like, I could draw these dolphins that I know I want to have these tribal marks on them. Yep. I want them to have, different things about them. And this is something interesting that I've been meaning to say on other interviews that I don't get to I'm going to say today that another thing that happened to me when I was really small was I remember kicking the ball, and I was probably like 7 years old. I kicked the ball in the neighbor's yard. I went over there to get the ball, and as I came around the corner, there was a group of cats in a circle having a meeting. In my mind, I was like, these cats are like in a council. They're having a meeting, and it was the wildest thing. I remember it to this day, like it happened yesterday. They all kind of got up, looked at me, and they all went their own ways. They all scattered their own ways. And as a kid, I was like, oh, this must be what animals do. They meet on their own. And I thought, and obviously, well, not obviously, but I've never seen that ever happen again. But that stayed with me. And so this idea of an animal council that would potentially be judging humans has always stayed with me. And I was glad that I was able to incorporate it in some form in this book. Now, all of that to say that because I'm also a storyteller in music, so I'm a hip hop artist. I do conscious hip hop music, so that's been my medium for the longest time. I also wanted to tell the story about what's important. As a poet, it's my responsibility to talk about sustainability, about what's happening to the planet, pollution, climate change, everything that's happening to the planet, and what we can do about it. Most important is like we can do something about it. So why not put it in a book, as fantastic and magical as it is, to also ground it in some reality.
So a cat council, I mean, that's pretty amazing. I've never heard that before. So
well, listen how amazing that is, because I don't know if you follow the Sandman.
Yeah, you talk about this, yeah.
Yeah, we've talked. Mike and I have talked about this because the Sandman series, and I don't know if Neil Gaiman also wrote it in a comic book form, but they did something very similar, and I was just like, to me, that just blows my mind. That speaks to a collective consciousness that we all have, because it was a very similar story about cats. But anyway, that was a side note.
So I love that. Well, but I love that you said that you got your kids involved in like helping you like think through this story, with a council and all of that. I mean, that's super cool. Tim, I would love to hear. So from my understanding, this is a novel that you created, and then did you actually have it released? Was it self-published, or was it something that was just kind of private, and then you got to this point where you turned it into the graphic novel?
Yeah, so I wrote it all out. I do have some people who I knew who put me in touch with a publisher that was wanting to put it out as in long form, which did intrigue me. And I was like, wow, this is amazing how fast this is moving. Why not put it out? But the idea was always that I wanted it to be a graphic novel. And so I turned down that offer and was just like, I gotta find an artist. And so yeah, it was definitely a serendipitous situation. I have a really good friend that knew I had written this novel. She knew I was looking for a artist. I had been looking for different artists and just not able to find it. So she said, hey, my neighbor is an amazing artist. And so she didn't share anything when she said that. She was just like, he's an amazing artist. And I was like, okay, I know everybody.
Trust your judgment on that.
Yeah, yeah. So I was like, can you send me something? And so she sent me Mike's website. And so once I clicked it, I was instantly blown away by his artwork, by his, all the colors, the character development. And I really was like, wow, this could be the guy. I hope he's, open to it. I hope that he's also willing to take on such a big project. And so we set up a time to meet. And so I went over to Mike's house. Luckily, we lived in the same town. We actually currently live in another town. Yeah, we live in the same town now, even though we both moved. I'm following Mike, right? So, Mike, you are my leader. Yeah. So we went over, and we instantly clicked. Mike has a lot of the similar values, principles. He's a family guy. We both went to the same university, UMass Amherst, like the same music, and then what was amazing about that meeting is that he agreed to do a cover for me, a draft cover, the first 5 pages, and also some concept art, which for me was great, and the price made sense. I was like, yes, let's do this. And the agreement was like, let's do this, and then let's see if it makes sense to go beyond that. And after Mike delivered, and once again, I was blown away. I was really happy to see these words just really come to life. I was like, man, I hope this guy would be able to do this big project, because at the time it was in written form. It was over 100 pages. I knew it was a big project. I knew it was going to be a commitment. I was like, I hope he could take on this commitment, and he agreed, which was great. And the last thing I'll say is that we then agreed to do a Kickstarter project. So we put out an earlier version independently that met the Kickstarter goal, which was, wonderfully received. And then, after, and, I'll let Mike tell the story of how we got connected with Dark Horse, which was a dream come true.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into that, I would love to hear a little bit about, like, how do you, like, as you're talking about this, my mind is going, how in the world do you take a written novel and turn it into like this stuff with words and, the comic book style? That's mind blowing. So like, what is that? What are the steps for that? Like, what's the process for that?
Well, doing the concept work in the initial pages was essential to get like my head in that world that he created.
Mm-hmm.
So once the style had been determined and that we felt comfortable with the direction visually, I kind of tore into the material that he sent me. And honestly, I've never translated this much information into a book. So this was a new concept for me, but it's exciting because for me, when I'm reading it, when I read any book, I'm visualizing what what you're reading. Everybody kind of does that, right? But when you're going to draw it, you pay super attention to the details in what you're reading too, because you realize, well, this will be fun to draw this, or this, these are kind of enjoyable things I can do. So I was so immersed in that story, and fortunately the story is exciting. There's a lot of really interesting things going on. There's scenes that happen in the book that I had never seen before in other things and other types of media. So I felt like there was some real original content here that I was going to be able to sort of leave my mark on. And so, I would just read it, and I did one full reading of it, and then I went back in, and as I was reading it, I was doing very rough sketches of what I thought the scene should be, and similar to, a cameraman would be in a movie. Comics is sort of like that, your camera angle, you relying on my, like 30 years of reading comics and consuming movies and all that stuff, and knowing sort of what's worked and what I enjoy. I started to translate what he had written. And the thing about comics is that you have this ability to sort of control time when someone's reading. So if there's a scene that is really big or needs to be slowed down, you can make it a full page, or make the reader have to stop and pay attention to it, especially with things like a lot of detail. So in this book, you'll see there's a lot of really detailed spreads where it's like the council of all the animals. So those are times when we want the reader to like stop, take it in. And, it's similar to movies where you control the time a little differently. Whereas when you're reading prose, it can really rely on the reader's sort of speed at which they read and things like that. So I feel like that's one of the benefits of
That's
comics.
interesting. Yeah.
The benefits of text and visuals, so yeah, when I went into that, it took me about a full week just to plot it out. And I did that all digitally. And, I said that to Tem, and if anybody else would just see these drawings, they look very rough. They're very for me, they're very clear in what they portray, because it's all about composition and hitting sort of certain beats and making sure that the, like the flow is good and things like that. So Tem, because he was so familiar with the story, I think he could follow along kind of. But I do felt like inside, like there was sort of a part of him that was sort of just trusting that I was doing the right thing, because it's kind of overwhelming because it was 100 pages, but when I translated it to a comic, it was like 200, because a lot of this stuff had to be sort of fleshed out, and when you're choosing how to put panels on a page, you're spreading things out. Some things need more attention, and it just doesn't. It's not going to be page for page. So I'm like, Tem, this is like a really big thing, just so you know. But, so we played around with, does this thing want to be 2 books? Does it want to be this and that? And I think at the end of the day, we were like, we want to give everything we have to one campaign. And let's just go all in on this and just go for it. And that's what we ended up doing. And that process worked for me. So I would use the same thing for book 2
Yeah.
when we get there. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's so cool. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's kind of like mind blowing to think about all the intricate steps to take to get to a finished product. I mean, which, that's the case with publishing any book because there's so many steps, but when you have so much art and graphics behind it, like it's a whole nother aspect to it. Yeah.
Well, I will say too, Brittany, that we in the most recent version of the book, there's like bonus materials, and so you can kind of see like that's what the rough stuff looked like.
Mm-hmm.
So
Very
it's
interesting.
really,
Yeah.
really, really rough, and there's like 200 pages of that, which is, what became the beginnings of the book. So there's like bonus stuff in the book, so you can see that kind of stuff
Cool.
too.
Very cool.
272 pages ended up being the final count. So
I love it. So, okay, cool. So that's kind of setting us up. How did you then get connected to Dark Horse?
So, over the last like 15, 20 years, I guess at this point, I've been sort of self-publishing my own stuff and going to independent comic events like Small Press Expo, Mocha Festival in New York. And my first book that I published was something called Black Mane, which was a book that won the Zarek Award in 2005. And it was that book that I sort of like I got introduced to the sort of comic community and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did an event out in Oregon where Dark Horse is located. And one of the editors there went to, I think I had an exhibition, I did a comic pages. And he bought the book and I signed it. And I always remember this to this day that I wrote the dumbest message in that book. I still lose sleep over this. Like it was just so like, it made no sense. It was because there was like this monster in the book. I was like, I hope you're not afraid of me because that monster, and it was like, what am I doing? But that editor and I stayed in touch for 15 years. Like I kept sending him stuff. Yeah, he was very supportive of my work. We never like a lot of the work that I did. It was very like niche and it didn't really fit with Dark Horse at the time, but he was always very supportive. He sent me a ton of Plants vs. Zombie books because my son was a huge fan of that franchise. But, when Tem and I were together, I was like, I have this connection over at Dark Horse I've been in touch with who's a supporter of my work. And I've never had like a finished product to send him. But this book, it actually has a wider audience. So I sent him that book and he was immediately interested in it. This was a successfully crowdfunded project. Sent him a copy of the book, and from there, the support was really, really obvious. And long story short, it's been a great experience. So,
I think one of the things, the feedback that editor sent back to us was how amazing the animals that Mike drew. Like Mike just drew, so many great images, but the animals, really pop out and stick out. And so and I always think about that email, the feedback that Mike received that he shared with me. And he was like, wow, the line, drawings on animals, really amazing. And, so I think, it's undeniable the quality and the time and effort that Mike, put into it, that we think, I know, when we're out in conventions and we're showing it to people, how people they're just wowed, especially if you're an animal lover, right? If you're someone who loves animals, you're just going to be instantly kind of blown away. We had one woman was like, sharks, there's sharks in here. Oh, I love sharks. We're like, okay, buy the book. So, there's not just sharks, there's dolphins and there's, hyenas and wolves and tigers. Oh my God. Yeah. So
that's
Mike
so
really
cool.
That was crazy though. Just a sidebar. Like, there were scenes in the book where Tem would be like, just all of the animals are there. So I'm like having to just like, all right, I just gotta come up with find every other animal I can find that
Yeah.
can, and it's just like this random, just like all the animals are there.
Yep. Well, even the cover, I mean, it's a lot of animals on the cover, even though they're a little bit silhouetted, with the kids in the middle, but
I
yeah.
will tell you, Brittany, no one else knows about this. There is a axolotl on there that my daughter asked me to put on there. Is a tiny axolotl next to, I think it's next to the hippo's face.
Oh,
And there's a hamster in there. There's like a snake that my son wanted to be there.
oh, that's so sweet.
Get some little animals
We
in
paid attention to the little guys.
I love that. Well, so let's get into kind of the overall overarching theme in the book with environmental justice. And I would just love for Tim, for you to share like why that's important to you and why you felt like why you chose the medium that you did to portray that theme and kind of share that story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, back in 2007, I went to this conference called Connecting for Change in my hometown of New Bedford, Mass. And and I was really blown away. I'd been an activist for years at that point and an artist, but I wasn't aware of this emerging movement called sustainability. And, I really loved how it connected not only the environmental, we talk about the three E's, but, the economic and equity. Equity was the realm that I kind of was working in. But the environment and economics kind of coming together really stood out because it also expanded like this reality that there's a lot of people working on this problem, on this challenge that is affecting all of us. And so that's when I got hip to different things. I got hip to the fact that bees were no longer going back to their hives. And, I'm from New Bedford. And so whaling is a big thing in New Bedford. And so, I started thinking about like, wow, we have all these images of the whaler. And it's like, wow, this is how we were getting oil back in the 1800s, was actually taking these animals and melting down, hunting them and melting down their blubber. And this is just history that we like learned as kids in school, and we were proud about it. We should be. However, like anything else, there's always these layers, right? And there's always these things that we need to take into account, especially when you deal with the environment. And so I really started just, evolving my craft as a musician. Like I said, as a poet, I take that very serious. A poet is supposed to always speak about what's happening, what's relevant, even at their own, at their own detriment. Because sometimes you're speaking truth to power, and power doesn't want to hear the truth sometimes. So excuse me. So I really had made a shift as an artist, still do a lot of social justice stuff, but the environment became very important to me, not only because I enjoyed it, being on the coast. I love going to the beach, being from the Cape Verde Islands. My family's Cape Verdean, volcanic islands. We're always connected to the land and the ocean and the sea. So all these things were just a part of me, but I hadn't really explored them. And when, like most people around 2007 and or even earlier, you started becoming aware that like, hey, man-made pollution and climate change, all these things are real and we can impact them. I took it upon myself to really make a lot of my art be about that. Even though, I'd run into, because I work with youth too, and they'd be like, why is your raps always about the environment? It's like, why do you rap about, it's like, because that other stuff isn't me. I grew up in an era in hip hop where you had to keep it real. I grew up where, De La Soul and Tribe Called Quest, these people that were like native tongue. It wasn't what's mainstream even today. Like it wasn't, we were never about glorifying materialism or putting down other people or calling, names. It wasn't like what I was brought up. And so for me, my art had to reflect that. I had to keep it real. And so when I started writing the story, I knew it was going to be a comic book. I wanted it always to be a movie. I wrote it with the sense or the lens of it becoming a movie one day,
Mhm.
because I love movies. I love comic books, and I love movies, and I know there's a natural marriage to them. A lot of, as we know, a lot of the movies that are coming out nowadays are all based off of graphic novels or
Yeah.
movies. I mean, or books. And we know, like, the best movies, even though they're never better than the book, they always, the best movies are based off of books, right? And
Yeah.
so, because people are taking that time to actually write something that's meaningful. So all of that to say that when I was writing it, um, I'm a very visual person. Like I said, I draw also. And so I would literally, and I'm interested in your process, Brittany, but my process was, I would sit down. First of all, I'd have to find space, right? Because I have
Mhm.
kids, I have, a very busy lifestyle. I would seclude myself, whether I was going to a hotel room or going to the library and saying, okay, let me write this. And I would literally just close my eyes and just be like, what is this story? Like, tell me, what's the story that needs to get told? And I just start writing. And I wouldn't use a computer because I'm very slow with typing. I would just use a
Mhm.
pen and paper, and I would just, write it out. And I just literally just close my eyes, like, okay, what do I see visually in my head, and how do I describe it? And I didn't get caught up so much in the words at first, right? I was just like, I want to just write this through. I want to get like the
Yeah.
meat down, and then after I'll cut out the fat. And so the story really wanted to be about environmentalism. I didn't plan on it, it just was like, the first scene is taken right out of my life as someone who works with youth. I worked for Youth Build for like 13 years, along with doing my hip hop. So I worked nonprofit and doing my
Mhm.
music. And, we were at the beach. There was a professor there that was doing this scavenger hunt with the youth of New Bedford. There's this big, tall Puerto Rican kid with an afro who was always cracking jokes the whole time, right? Wearing like knee high water and, salt water. And we're just, having a good time, but also like doing the scavenger hunt. And so the first scene is from there. And so that natural kind of like, oh, how cool would it be to, then get something, really terrible happen, and now they're getting whisked away underwater to Atlantis, and, have to go on this adventure. And so the whole time I was, putting my what I like to say, my seasoning on it. But
Yeah.
I felt like
Mhm.
the story was, I was channeling it, what I mean? And nothing, so special, that's special to me. But I believe we all have this ability. But I was channeling the story, even to the point, at one point, for those who read the book, I was like, they got to fight this guy, this Xander, who's this oil tycoon billionaire turned evil world conqueror. And we know in
Mhm.
real life, there's all these billionaires doing things that are impacting our society every day. And so I was like, wow, what if this billionaire went the wrong route and chose to, really enact his plan? But how would these four kids be able to defeat him and his army? And, all of a sudden it was like these animals popped into this cave and was like, you need to help us free and emancipate these animals that are in the zoo. And I was like, there we go. We got we got the army, we got the zoo rebels. And so it was just a very organic way of approaching the story. And I told it in that way. I didn't really try to hit certain beats all the time, like, oh, you got to introduce this and this place. But I really wanted the story to tell itself. And the last thing I'll say that I think was interesting was, I honestly, when I started writing the story, and why it took me, I think, so long, like 5 years, was because I kept going back to the music. I was like, I want to do my music. That's cool that the story's in my head. But the story just kept wanting to get told. And the story wanted to be about environmentalism, even though, I was like, I just want to tell, this superhero story with all youth in it, a story that, youth of color and all youth can see themselves. Everyone's story needs to get told. And, this, when I started writing this is pre Black Panther, the Phenomenon movie came out. This is
Mhm.
pre Moana. Actually, when I saw Moana and her relationship to the ocean, I was like, oh my God, I gotta write this book, because this was Agoo, the water, the
Yeah.
live water. I was like,
That's
if I
cool.
don't write it, somebody else is gonna write it, and I'm gonna be
Yeah.
kicking myself because I had this idea, and I'm not. And luckily, the similarities ended there with this conscience in the water. Planeta Blu has an aspect of that, and luckily that's where the similarities end. And so I was like, man, I got to do this, and committed to it, and here we are, 5-6 years later with this amazing book.
Yeah. Well, but I feel like that's what happens with art. It just kind of organically starts to come out when you give yourself space to feel it. And it sounds like that's what you did, during that time. And yeah, I mean, things do take longer than we want them to, but that's also just part of the process. I mean, I experienced that with my own book because I finished it in its most complete version in 2013. And it's taken me 10 years later to this year to have gone through, kind of making sure it was the best version of itself to then present it to the world. But I think it's interesting to hear you say that you had the theming of environmental justice kind of bleeding. It sounds like it kind of bled over from your life into the book, and you maybe at some point didn't even realize that was happening. And I feel like that happens a lot with art, in particular with books, because I experienced that myself with some of those. It's like the things that we're going through in our own lives, we kind of, without realizing it, put it into the art that we're presenting to the world. But that's what makes it relatable to people. So it's a really cool marrying of all of that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's
You process, what you're experiencing. If there's confusion or if there's overwhelming feelings about something, giving that energy to something productive or creative, there's something really powerful about that. And I think most creative people feel that way, where it's like, oh, I can make sense of things by painting or drawing or singing or writing, because all that intense energy that's building up in me, I'm able to like hyper focus it into this something, and there's like a big release from that, and I think it allows you to sort of either get closure or heal or again get to some sort of centered space with things. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, very, very, very therapeutic. That's for sure. And as Mike said, very, very healing and meditative, right? To be able to, really look at an issue from a place, even if it's fiction, to say, hey, like this could also be, part of the solution, right? The inspiration. It's very difficult now, especially for the youth, and I still work with young people and the youth every day. It's very easy to look at the world, especially if you're consuming media, whether it's the news or social media, to think like we're done for, right? It's just a matter of time until we're until we're extinct off this planet. However, we want to always be hopeful. I think it's important to just not be just caught up in this despair or this depression about what could be, and to actively work towards it. And why I choose to always work with youth, not only is it to help them, but it helps me. As we know, anyone who does any type of servant leadership, the youth always give me hope. And so the main character in this book, her name is Laris. She was based off of this young woman, this girl at the time. Now she's a young woman. She's in college now, who was just amazed. I was always amazed at her maturity, at her level of how she showed up, still as a kid, right? Still joking and doing everything that she did. But we'd sometimes have her like represent Vela, this after school program, and she'd go to like Amherst College and just present on the whim, on the spot, like these really huge ideas, and really condense them into a very powerful, succinct a description of her experience. And I was just like, could someone like Laris in my story, stand up in front of this council and give this speech, to in essence to protect humanity and to save humanity? Is this realistic? Because you want the reader to be like, this, oh,
Yeah.
but I was like, she could, right? Jaylee could, Jaylee could do this. If Jaylee could do this, then Laris could do it, right? And so that always helped me is to really ground myself in real people that I knew. Even Tyler is based loosely off of a childhood friend of mine in high school. Who came from Indiana, and then Tumez, a Cape Verdean kid. Who I know a lot about Cape Verdean kids, but my kids are Cape Verdean too. And Laris, his mom, my daughter's mom is Puerto Rican, and so I wanted them once again to see themselves and to see like, hey, if these superheroes, I think that's what helps. That's why we love superheroes so much, right? Is like they're able to tap into this force, this power, and to, against all odds, right? It's the classic David and Goliath kind of story. And against all odds to win, catch a win, even if it costs a lot, even though there might be sacrifice, but at the end we win. And that's what's important. I wanted to tell that story for the young people.
Yeah. Well, the name of my podcast is Be Your Own Hero. And it's exactly what you're talking about. And that's why I started the podcast, because I want to, share these stories around how we can individually, overcome adversity. We're becoming the superheroes in our own lives. And, the characters that you created, you're showcasing that anyone coming from anywhere can, kind of rise up and become the best version of themselves and achieve these things, overcome things. And, which in this case, standing up for things that are important to you, things that you believe in, and making like a positive impact in the world around you. And yeah, I love that. Yeah, because I think we all want to see that hope, when we're that hope that we can become the best version of ourselves and truly make a positive impact in the world. So yeah, that's really cool.
Totally. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, so I would love to hear kind of as like we wrap things up, I would love to hear what like your future goals and dreams are. I know you've kind of hinted at maybe another book. I know you said you could see it as a movie, which is super cool. Is there any kind of dreams or goals that you would love to share with us?
Yeah. So we got a lot of things in the works. I think it's cool to have this brand also of Planeta Blu. I think it resonates with folks. And so I've been working on this audio book for the past few months, and I actually have Jaylee coming in and voicing Laris for the audio
Cool.
book. And I've had already like an original score, a theme song written, and I'm working with musicians that I know to build out the score of it, and been really getting a lot of voice acting from youth that this is their first time doing it, because that's really important for me, is to give them this opportunity, and they're excited to come in and do that. But also actors, like seasoned actors who have a lot of experience, and they're doing a lot of like the council positions and such. So that's due out next year, ideally early next year, but we'll have to see how everything shapes out. And then the books, I'm working on book 2. I wish I was working on it more, but it's so
You.
hard. Yeah, we just put out the book, right, like 2 weeks ago, and so it's like a lot of promotion, right? We're promoting, we're on podcasts, and doing book signings, and did the book launch. So all of that takes away from the writing process. However, I do have a few chapters, Mike, that I'm going to transcribe for you, that I'm going to send your way so we can start thinking about it. But we had a book, a writer's retreat last year, now maybe a year and a half ago anyway.
Yeah, it was still doing during COVID, because I had COVID during that time.
Oh, damn. Yeah. Yeah, so he was joining us via Zoom.
Virtually,
But we mapped out, so I had some few trusted folks that have been around and related to the project, to say like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, this is the arc of this series, because it is going to be a series. I thought it was going to be a trilogy, but after we went through everything that we talked about, it looks like it's going to be 4 books, which I'm like, I don't think they'll be as long as this. As Mike said, this book really, if
I don't think Mike believes you.
I roll. My eyes
get
just roll
ready,
out of
Mike.
the
Get ready, buddy. But it was like two books, right? It could have been easily
Yeah.
two books, and I think the other books will be a little shorter. But there's this huge arc, and so we're gonna, push them out there. I love to hear the excitement from the young people. They're like, "When's the second book coming out? When's the second book coming out?" When they saw this Dark Horse version, they were like, "Is this the second book?" I'm like, "It kind of is, but not really," But the reality is, we're working on those books right now. The second one, which I hope it to be. I think a lot in movies, the Empire Strikes Back kind of
Mhm.
uh, uh, book. So get ready for some really hard times, and then yeah, the movie and the series, that's always been the big dream. We've had some very great conversations with some studios, some streaming. One streaming, I don't gas it that much up, but a major streaming um, platform that gives us that hope, that not only hope, but like, hey, we're trending and tracking in the direction that we want it to go, and so we're excited about this. It's cool when people just see the book, grab the book, they look at it and they're like, this, I could see this as a movie. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, that's what we want to see, because as we continue to pitch, we want whoever in those studios to get that same idea when they see the book. And I think we got something here, so that's part of it. Mike, am I missing anything? Anything else that we're?
Well, I mean, for me, like a dream, I would like to continue working on the books, like, and keep going with it. It's a challenge because it's such a time consuming, like, so for me, I was doing the art, the drawing, the coloring, the lettering, the layout, and everything. So it's a super time consuming
Mhm.
endeavor. So, you know, I would love it if I could do that and like financially be able to because what's interesting about comics is that even like some of the best comic artists don't make a big living off of it. It's not
Mhm.
a very like lucrative field to be in.
Mhm.
And I follow a lot of master artists. Like I see their work and I'm blown away. And they're like, yeah, no, my partner makes the money, and and these are established artists, and so the trick is sort of getting into the other fields where it's movies and entertainment and stuff,
Mhm.
where you have a property, an IP. But my dream would be to actually continue to create art and comics and books and financially support myself just with that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because my day job is in the arts, but I have other books that I want to do, and I have a tabletop game I designed, like all of these things that it would be great to be able to just focus on those things. Like I like to
Mhm.
just be able to focus on Planeta Blu too, and
Yeah.
not have to take on other work at the same time. So that's like like in the back of my mind, that sort of dream of like, who's actually just doing this and nothing else, and it's working, because I'm telling you, it's very rare to see that. There's an illusion that if you're successful, you're also financially successful, which most people know is not the case.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
that's a more like pragmatic dream that I have.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, I talk,
Yeah.
being in this world now, talking to a lot of different, people, creatives, and that's the dream for everyone, just to be able to focus on your craft. And I think it's a very noble thing to dream about and take steps towards to make that happen.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I have the same thoughts. It's kind of like I think about it from that standpoint of like multifaceted, like with podcasting, with
Mhm.
maybe other appearances, or like you're talking about with books turning into movies. I mean, all that stuff is so cool. So it's kind of like having that whole personal branding around whatever that art is that you're creating. Like, yeah, that
Mhm.
would be super cool. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'll add, it's been really not only exciting but fulfilling for me to be able to, we've been invited to schools to do presentations or assemblies, and we've talked about this, like, Mike, if we could just get like one of these, even a month, but one of these a week ideally would be great, to show up, the excitement that these young people have. I always bring in the hip hop aspect of it. I feel like it's a really untapped lane. So that, I think, is just a stream of revenue that's real, that I've seen. It's just like anything else is the volume, how do you really
building
scale?
blocks. Yeah, for sure. Well, so to close, Tim, I would love to ask you, what do you hope that, you're so passionate about youth, so what would you hope that young people take away from the book and from kind of what your platform is?
Yeah, I just want them to, really be themselves. I know it's very cliche now, but I keep saying it. Authenticity really matters. Being compassionate and vocal about what you believe in, even if you don't say it the right way. It's important to stand for what you believe in, especially your dreams. I think there's some people right now in the world who have turned this world into a nightmare. And the more that youth can really tap into their dreams with the idea of, hey, I can help others with this dream connects with other people in a positive way, then I know that this world can transform. There's no reason for us to have a world where people are starving, people are, under duress, depressed, all these things. So I want the young people to take this book, be inspired by it, and really be that hero. They are truly the leaders that that they're waiting for. They're the ones, don't you can bring other people together and have a team, but know that at the end of the day, it's going to be up to you to make this change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if I can just add to that too.
Yeah.
Kind of like talking about the environmental justice part of the book, this sort of idea that the older generations have left the youth all these problems to solve, and this sort of like, especially with the environment, like, why were you guys dealing with this stuff? There's sort of that general feeling, I think, with young people where, now we have to clean up after you guys. And I think with this book, it sort of reinforces that the youth, everyone has value, and that the youth also have influence on things that do positive things in the world. And it does it in this sort of fantastic way, but, it reinforces everyone belongs and everyone can do something. And I think that kind of gets, across when you read it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It's wonderful. Well, guys, thank you so much. This has been, I would say, an inspiring conversation. So I hope everyone feels that way and will also inspire you to pick up the book. I will hold it up one more time so you can't forget. Yay. So, okay, so Mike and Tim, what's the best place for everyone to connect with you guys online and learn more about the book?
Yeah, so right now the book's available everywhere, but planetablu.com is a way that you can always connect with us. We're also on social media. On social media, it's always Planeta Blu Book. So Facebook, Instagram, not really much on X or Twitter, but yeah, especially Instagram. I think Instagram gets updated the most in the website. But yeah, pick it up. It's even available to order on Target, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, like everywhere, really.
Anywhere
So
and everywhere.
yeah, everywhere. Get it, pick it up.
Yay, awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me. This was such an awesome conversation. I appreciate both of your efforts with trying to, share more about this really important topic with the world and inspire people to, make change in their, we can all make a change in our own little community. And I think it's important for everyone to realize that. Doesn't have to be some crazy huge thing, but taking just that first step is important. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Mike and Tim, thank you so much again. Thanks everybody for taking the time to watch and listen. Don't forget to pick up the book, and we will catch you next time. Bye.